Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 242, and this spooky, scary Sunday, I have 3 tales from you from Let's Not Meet. Our first is about a boyfriend taking care of his girlfriend's little brother and ran into a creepy man. Our second is about a mother who sees a car on the side of the road that needs help. Last but never least is about a friend who fantasizes about the death of another. Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. It's about to get spooky. I'm never taking my girlfriend's brother to the park again. So this happened a year ago, and I'm pretty shaken by the whole event. I thought I'd tell you my story. I live in the UK, and in autumn, it gets dark at about 4 p.m. There was a school autumn break that week, so all the kids were at home. So that means my girlfriend's brother was home too. I'd been with her for a year at that point, and her family knew me pretty well, and her brother enjoyed my company. She'd recently been pretty stressed out. Her parents were going out across the country for the day, so she had to look after her brother. But I thought that I'd give her a day off so she can just cool off. I asked her parents if I could look after their son for the day instead, and they did agree. So I came around 8 a.m. and they let me in before they set off. My girlfriend's brother woke up about an hour later, and she followed shortly afterwards. We went out for breakfast at a local cafe together and went back to her house when we were done. And once I dropped her off, I took her brother to the park. We got there about 2 p.m. and the place was pretty packed. Eventually the sun started going down and the place was completely empty by 4 p.m. I texted my girlfriend and told her we'd be home in a bit, and she said, okay. I'm going to be honest, I completely lost track of time. Me and her brother were having fun being the only two in the park. Me and her brother were stood on top of this really tall climbing frame with a slide on it. It was almost pitch black at this point, so I was using my phone as a flashlight. A notification popped up on my screen, and it was my girlfriend asking me where we were. I responded, "Oops, coming home now," and I told her brother we had to go. He sighed and asked if we could go down the slide, and I said yes. Before I went down, I knew what the park looked like. There were streetlights all around it, benches everywhere, some trees, and places for kids to play. When I came out of the slide, there was something weird. A man had appeared out of nowhere and was stood beneath one of the street lights. He had a trench coat on and a beanie hat. I immediately got my girlfriend's brother behind me and called out to the man with a friendly, "Hi there." I got a response. He started groaning. I noticed he was swaying back and forth in the light, and he had his mouth open, drooling, with a blank look in his eyes. This man made me feel effing uneasy. I picked the little bro up and kept checking on the guy the entire time. There was an exit to my left that led to the path back home, so I left out that way and kept checking behind me every few seconds. The guy still stood there. The path where the guy stood merges with the big main path if you walk out through some bushes, and so does the one I walked through. I was walking down the path for about 2 minutes, periodically checking behind me, and I thought I was in the clear. I wasn't. I was on the straight stretch of the path with lots of street lights when I saw him again. He was stood beneath one, looking up at it, and he was playing with something in his hands. I looked closer and realized it was an effing knife. I kept walking and walking, checking behind me constantly. Girlfriend's little brother was so scared he had his head tucked in my chest. I noticed this guy seemed to be moving to a new streetlight whenever I turned around. Initially, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but I started counting them and realized 2 streetlights behind me had definitely turned into 5. I could faintly hear the groan noise, and he was occasionally moaning as well. I picked up the pace a bit and turned a corner, getting into the last stretch of the street before I got to my girlfriend's house. This was when I heard him behind the row of bushes. That moaning noise sounded angry, and I heard his heavy footsteps bounding down the path. This man was effing running. I immediately broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I turned an alleyway at the front of the street and got behind my girlfriend's house. There's a big bush there, and I crouched down behind that and spammed her phone with messages to open the back gate. I hugged her brother close until she opened it for us and got us in quickly. It felt like years. I went to the front of the house and had it confirmed that I managed to shake him. He was now in the street, circling where I'd been, outside of the alleyway just a moment ago. He was still moaning. He had that knife in his hand still. He was starting to kick people's bins over. I called the police immediately, but he was gone by the time they arrived, and as far as I know, they never found him. There was a similar incident near the area a few months ago I saw in a local Facebook group, but I don't think anything came of that either. Her parents thanked me for keeping their son safe and didn't hold any will against me for the situation. He went back to normal pretty much that day afterwards, but he still has nightmares about the event. When my country isn't in lockdown, I'm still allowed to look after him with my girlfriend, funny enough. But we haven't been back to that park ever since, and I still check over my shoulder and break into a cold sweat every time I'm alone in the street. Guy fakes his car being broken down. This happened to me when I was about 12 or 13 years old, so about 15 years ago, and I am a female. The town that I lived in has developed a lot since this story, but when this happened, there were a lot of factories spread out with lots of land in between them. There was a Walmart being built in the area, but it had barely started construction. There was a main highway that ran through there, but my mom didn't like taking it as much, as traffic would get bad most of the time. The side streets we would take were desolate and not much light. There was also little to no cars taking these streets. I can't remember where we were coming from that night, but in the car that night was my mom, my brother, who is 3 years younger than me, and me. My mom is obviously driving. I'm in the passenger seat. My brother is sitting behind me. My mom is the sweetest person ever, but she is very adamant that she will never stop to help someone on the side of the road or pick someone up, especially when her kids were in the car. She does, however, make sure to call the police so they can get help. It was about 9 p.m. and we were going home when my mom and I spotted someone on the side of the road by the passenger side with their hood up. Nothing out of the ordinary, as my mom slows down a little since it's dark outside and doesn't want to harm anyone that might be fixing their car. As soon as we're close to the car, this guy steps out from around the hood of the car towards the street and is waving us down. I don't remember much of description because I wasn't paying too much attention. Plus, I could barely see the man, but I do remember feeling bad we weren't at least going to stop to see what he needed. The man at this point is in the middle of the road waving his hands. But we come up on the car and we don't see anyone else in the car. So my mom swerves around him and tells my brother to find her phone in her purse that is on the floor between the front and the back seat. I look at my mom as she looks in her rearview mirror, and her face goes white and her eyes go wide. My mom slams her foot on the accelerator. This is highly unusual for my mom, as she's really good at going the speed limit. At this point, I know something is wrong. My mom's voice goes high and in a panicked voice is asking my brother, where is her phone? I'm yelling at her, what is going on? All of this chaos is freaking my brother out, and with him being so little, is crying and can't find the phone. My mother keeps her eyes on the road but keeps glancing up continuously at her rearview mirror and finally answers, he's following us. I'm not exactly sure what she is talking about, but I know this isn't a good situation. My mom is speeding towards the highway, and thank goodness there is no traffic. I look in the back window and see somebody passing cars trying to keep up with my mom. I asked her where she's going, and she told me she's heading to the police station. As we're getting close, my mom tells me to jump out of the car, and as soon as she stops the car and grab my brother from the back seat while she's running around the car to meet us. My mom stops right in front of the police station and doesn't even wait for the car to fully come to a stop before she puts the car in park. I open my car door as fast as I can and grab my brother, who has quickly opened his door. I take off in a full sprint with my brother in one hand and my mom in the other. Once we finally talk to the police officer is when I finally understand the full extent of what happened. My mom told the police officer that once we had passed the guy with a broken down car, he quickly ran to the hood of his car and slammed it. He then got into his car and sped after us. That was when my mom knew this guy had horrible intentions for us. She said he kept trying to speed up to get on the side of us, but she was able to speed up to avoid that. Once my mom turned towards the police station, she said the guy stopped following her, but she wanted to get to the police station in case he changed his mind. She gave the best description of the guy and his car, but because everything happened so fast, she didn't get a license plate number. I'm pretty sure the police never found him. I'm also not sure what this guy had planned for us, if we had actually stopped to help. But I know it was nothing good. To the guy that faked his car being broken down on an empty street, let's not ever meet again. High school stalker fantasized about my death. I moved a lot growing up. By the time freshman year of high school came around, I had moved 7 or so times, and was about a year and a half into my most recent move. I found a pretty close group of friends in middle school, and we all went to high school together. I met him through one of those close friends. They were in a band together, and even though he was almost 4 years older than us, we welcomed him into our group. Sam was easily twice my size, tall and heavyset, and originally kind of intimidating, although I was never afraid of large men before him. Lesson learned. I had a kind of bad home life, and I spent as much time as I could at school, sometimes hanging around the school campus until 6 or 7 at night with this friend group. 3 of us lived in the same direction, and we would walk the half-hour trip together until our paths split. One slightly colder evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the other had gone home already. I just thought he was being a gentleman. He mentioned something from a previous move when he lived in California. He didn't walk a friend home, and something horrible happened. He left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We got a lot closer after that. We bonded over both living in California and exchanged numbers. He would message me late into the night about his depression and self-harm, and I just wanted to help. A few months later, he tried to ask me out. It was this big romantic gesture. He learned a Disney song on the ukulele and sang it to me in the cafeteria. But I was already dating someone, and when I turned him down, he got angry. A freaky, quiet, twitchy kind of angry. I felt so bad. I started to see him everywhere. We were still friends, we still hung out in groups, but I would pass him on the street walking somewhere, and a few minutes later, I see that he had changed directions and had started following me. He would walk me to class by following me in passing periods at a distance. I started to minimize the group time we spent together, and he would follow me more. I had friends meet me at each class and walk me to the next one because I felt unsafe. He knew where I lived. Then he started to talk, not to me, but to mutual friends about that one girl in California who he tried to walk home. At first, she just shared my name, some crazy coincidence. Then she had the same brown curly hair and blue eyes. And every time he rambled about her, she became more and more like me. And then he said what happened. Over literal weeks, this fantasy evolved. They were walking home and they were jumped by some guy with a knife. It was a robbery gone wrong on her birthday. January 24th, my birthday. And she died horribly, and he couldn't react in time. She bled out in his arms. Sarah, who had brown, curly hair, blue eyes, my name, my birthday, and sounded just like me, bled out in his arms. Each retelling added more and more detail. And this guy, with his sick fantasy about my death, would follow me around and knew where I lived. My boyfriend was abusive, mentally and physically, but I stayed as close to him as I could whenever I could. Because if the worst happened, I knew for sure he could throw a punch. I never felt safe at school or in our little town walking home from school in the dark. One day at school, he had a breakdown, freaked out, and ran out of school in a panic. I was sent after him, and I found him curled up on the floor. I got closer, and I knew about his anxiety and depression, and my safety aside, I wanted to make sure he was okay. It was then that he told me the horrifying story I had been hearing from mutual friends, with added details. We'd been walking home from a concert in California. We passed a dark alley, and a homeless man came out with a rusty knife and asked for anything valuable. I fumbled for my phone. I didn't have anything else on me, and he thought I was calling the cops. He stabbed me once, twice, again and again, and Sam stood there, horrified. He saw red and grabbed a broken glass bottle near my body and attacked this homeless man. He killed him with his own knife. He told me he killed someone. My stalker killed someone. It didn't matter how messed up he was anymore. I didn't care if it was fantasy or real. I didn't care how it would affect his mental health anymore. I wanted to go to the police. I was scared for my life. My friends convinced me to go to the school's counselor first. That morning, we went and told them everything. The stalking, the stories, how he admitted to murder, and that he was the reason they moved from California. How I was afraid for my life and wanted to call the police. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She went to the principal, and the principal, not a mental health expert, called Sam in to talk about these accusations. The principal then informed me that he did not think that Sam had any kind of mental illness, or that I was in any danger. And that was that. I lost faith in adults, gave up on going to the police. I stayed with my friends, walking me between classes, hiding behind my abusive boyfriend, and looking behind me every step of my walk home that year. The counselors end up gaslighting us to the point where this all feels like a fever dream now. And I would think it's made up if it weren't for my journal entries recording the events and my growing panic, and the similar stories from my friend group. Edit. Clarifying some confusion. I don't think anyone actually died in California. I think he was a pathological liar and that he was so deep in a fantasy that he had convinced himself it was real. No, I wasn't physically hurt, but it was emotionally scarring, and the threat that he posed to me was 100% real. Hey Sam, let's not meet again. I was always an atheist and a skeptic, but when the police offered the assistance of a psychic in locating my missing child, I agreed immediately. When the old woman looked up at me with familiar eyes and whispered, "Why did you kill me, Daddy?" I realized my mistake. That's the end of our tales this evening. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit that like button and make sure it feels it. Please make sure you're subscribed and turn that bell to all notifications. I notice I'm getting some more non-subscribers coming to this channel, and I'd hate for any of you to miss anything. I hope you enjoyed this spooky, scary Sunday, and I'll see you this Thursday for our day tales. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.